They smiled as they poured wine, pretending this was just another Thanksgiving. But I saw the documents. The Mitchell's brownstone in Boston had never looked more perfect. A mahogany dining table stretched beneath an ornate chandelier. Silverware glinted. Candles flickered. Turkey aroma filled the air. But it all felt hollow. I kept my coat on longer than necessary, trying not to shiver from more than just the cold. Last Thanksgiving, I had wired $28,000 for Dad's emergency heart procedure. No one had thanked me. Natalie had made a joke about my savior complex, and Mom had looked away. "Lauren, there you are," Dad said now, raising his glass. "Glad you made it. We were just getting started." I nodded, eyes flicking to the end of the table where a stack of crisp white papers sat beside the dessert plates. Champagne had been chilled, extra seats added. I wasn't sure why. Something buzzed in my ribs. Natalie grinned like a shark. "We were just talking about how families evolve. Isn't that right, Mom?" Mom flinched but said nothing. Ben gave me a half smile, more guilt than warmth. They passed me a glass of wine. I didn't drink. I just watched as the small talk thickened like syrup. Veiled jabs hidden under cranberry sauce and smug glances. Dad cleared his throat. "Well," he began, "before we carve the turkey, there's something we need to address." I blinked. Here it was. "You've always gone your own way, Lauren, and that's admirable in some ways," he said. Natalie folded her hands, perfectly manicured. "But it hasn't exactly helped the family, has it?" My stomach sank. "We've had long discussions about responsibility, contribution, and, well, emotional readiness," Dad continued. "Wait," I said, voice low. "What is this?" He gestured toward the papers. "Lauren Mitchell, as of today, is no longer a named beneficiary in the family trust," he said, like it was just another line item. No one flinched. Not even Ben. My throat closed up. "You're—" I couldn't finish. "Not family anymore," Natalie said sweetly. "Not in the legal sense." I stared at them. At the people who'd taught me to ride a bike, who'd cheered when I got into MIT, who'd cried at my graduation. Or at least I thought they had. Dad slid the top sheet toward me. A notary stamp bled into the corner. My name had been removed from every asset. Property, bonds, the summer house in Martha's Vineyard. "You never contributed, Lauren," he added, voice colder now. "You build your little projects and disappear. You don't show up for family. You don't show up for us." Mom still hadn't looked at me. I couldn't breathe. Couldn't find a word sharp enough to cut through the betrayal in my chest. My phone buzzed loudly on the table. Everyone turned. "CEO Blake?" Jenna's voice rang from the speaker. "The Tokyo team is waiting." I drove home in silence. But home wasn't my apartment. It was the penthouse I bought 3 years ago. The building's doorman greeted me with his usual warmth, though I barely registered it. I stepped into the private elevator, alone with the weight of my thoughts, the chilled steel walls reflecting someone I hardly recognized anymore. The penthouse was quiet, sterile almost. Glass, chrome, polished wood. It overlooked the harbor like a watchtower. Below, the city shimmered with life. Inside, I kicked off my heels but left my coat on. "You're home?" Jenna said as she emerged from the media room, tablet in hand, blazer still on. She looked like she hadn't breathed since I left for dinner. I nodded. She followed me into the kitchen. "So?" "They did it," I said. "Dad made it official. I'm out." "Out? How?" I exhaled. "He removed me from the trust, said I'm emotionally unstable." Natalie didn't even blink. Jenna paused, then slid a folder across the counter. "We'll come back to that. Let's do the debrief." I leaned against the marble island, arms crossed. IPO team confirmed NASDAQ window. Late February. Legal says your shares will vest 2 weeks before. That puts your liquid assets around $84 million if the price holds. I nodded again. It should have felt like something. Instead, it felt like math. Series C funds transferred. All co-founders' shares locked. Regulatory is clean. No leaks. She looked up. Lauren, this is happening. I know. You should celebrate. I gave a hollow laugh. I just got excommunicated by people I used to call family. I'm not really in a Prosecco mood. She hesitated. They still think you're broke, don't they? I didn't answer. I walked to the window and stared at the water. They think I live in that walk-up I rented after college, I said. That I'm just scraping by. And I let them. Why? Because if they knew, they'd take more. Expect more. And I was still angry. I wanted them to feel like I was failing. I wanted them to look down on me. Jenna folded her arms. They didn't just look down. They erased you. I turned. Not anymore. I walked over to the desk in the corner, picked up the framed photo of my old lab team, back when we had nothing but caffeine and ideas. Now, our startup was valued at nearly $1 billion. Our research, cellular reengineering, was going to save lives. But my family wouldn't know, because I wasn't going to tell them. I'm done funding their comfort, I said, the words hard like iron. No more medical bills, no more bailouts. They chose to cut me off. Fine, let's see how they swim. Jenna tapped something into the tablet. Then there's one more thing you should see. She opened a secure folder, encrypted, password protected. The first file blinked into view. About the shell companies your father used to hide taxable assets. They smiled when they toasted me. They knew I'd already been cut out. The wine had tasted expensive. So had the china, the linen napkins, the glittering chandelier over the family dining table. All of it gleamed with the illusion of tradition, of togetherness. And yet the toast had been hollow, their smiles rehearsed, their words well-rehearsed knives. Now, back in my home office, I watched the cursor blink on the screen as my inbox filled with files from the CPA I'd hired last year. Not for taxes, but for quiet digging. I hadn't had the stomach to open the full reports. Not until now. The first PDF loaded slowly. My college fund. Supposed to have been locked in a 529 plan until I turned 24. Supposed to be mine. But in 2013, there had been a reallocation. The words in dry bureaucratic font. Amount, $72,000. Purpose, temporary family expense. I clicked another file. Travel invoices, flights to Italy, Natalie's honeymoon. Another file. Wire transfers from my account to a shell entity in Vermont, labeled Family Holdings LLC. My name was on the sender line. I'd never authorized it. Lauren, Jenna said from the doorway. She had changed into a sweater, her hair pulled back. Casual mode, but her face was tight. She walked in and placed a mug beside me. Tea, no doubt. I didn't look away from the screen. They used me, I said flatly. All these years I thought I was helping them, paying it forward. But they were stealing from me. Literally. Jenna leaned over my shoulder. That's the account your dad managed when you were still in school, right? I nodded. He told me I didn't need to worry about money, that he'd invested it, said it was a gift. We kept scrolling. One document jumped out. A scanned form, 10 years old, a power of attorney signed with my name, almost my signature. Almost. I zoomed in. The L was off, the loop too low. I would never have signed like that. He forged it, I whispered. Or coached someone else to do it, Jenna replied. But yes, that document gave him access to everything you earned before 2018. That included my internship stipend, my postgrad lab award, and my Series A founder's bonus. I felt sick. Jenna opened a second tab, side-by-side comparisons of my known signatures. She didn't have to say it. We both saw it. A chime from her phone. She opened it, frowned, and turned the screen toward me. Check this out. From Natalie's wedding planner's archived emails. We got access through the shared vendor folder. The email was from Natalie to the planner, dated the week of her wedding. Don't worry about budget. We have Lauren. She's basically our family's ATM until she dries up. The words didn't hurt the way I expected them to. They didn't cut like fresh glass. Instead, they felt old, rotted, like something I'd suspected for years but never dared name. Jenna didn't speak. She didn't need to. I turned back to the screen. Receipts, emails, altered forms. Years of betrayal, stitched together with practiced entitlement. Not one big wound, but 1,000 tiny slices, all bleeding at once. I stood slowly, walked to the window again, and stared into the Boston skyline. The harbor was dark now. Lights shimmered like signals, like calls to action. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't have to. It's time they see who really runs the table. People think revenge is loud. Mine will be orchestrated, silent, and precise. The office of Elena Gray overlooked a gray corner of Beacon Hill, its windows triple-glazed and tinted, built to mute sound and secrets. We sat across a mahogany desk with a single brass lamp casting gold over 2 identical copies of a legal document. The word revocation was printed at the top. I've excluded every family member from the original will, I said, sliding the pen across the page with slow intention. That includes the Mitchell Family Trust. Elena didn't flinch. You want to reassign beneficiaries to your charitable arm and reinstate your own name as sole proprietor of Blake Biogen Holdings, correct? I nodded once. Her eyes flicked briefly to Jenna, who sat just off to the side with a laptop open. Jenna's fingers moved over the keyboard like a pianist. Methodical, intentional. She was scheduling embargoed updates one by one into the system. No press releases yet. No public reveals. But the wheels were turning. After I signed the last document, Elena folded them neatly. You understand that this is irrevocable. Once filed, it can't be reversed. That's the point. From there, we walked to a cafe on Tremont Street. Small, tucked into an alley, too unassuming for anyone to notice. My phone buzzed silently against the leather of my bag, but I didn't reach for it. Jenna stirred her espresso. The shell accounts are being drained. I've rerouted the funds to the holding firm, the one with the Cayman node. I sipped my drink, feeling its bitterness sit comfortably on my tongue. And the shared family assets? Unwinding slowly. Today I submitted withdrawal letters to the Mitchell Foundation, the Cancer Research Guild, and the Gallery Trust. All were under your name as primary donor. I gave a half smile. Let them scramble for replacement funds. Jenna leaned back. You're really doing this. Doing what? Cutting the cord. I met her eyes. It was never a cord. It was a chain. From the cafe, we returned to my penthouse. But not to rest. The final step was mine alone. I entered the secure vault, what Jenna jokingly called the command center. Here, encrypted terminals blinked quietly. My old life was scattered across these drives. Scanned forms, signatures, voice memos, betrayals in file format. One account remained. Mitchell Family Capital. Joint. Originally designed to hold investment dividends between me and Dad. I'd let it stay untouched for years. Dad used it for liquidity. His second mortgage was rooted through it. Some property tax deferments. All because he thought I'd never bother touching it. He was wrong. I typed the authentication manually. No retina scan. No shortcut. The system asked, "Are you sure you want to revoke access to secondary administrator, Charles Mitchell?" Yes. I pressed enter. There was no alarm, no warning beep. Just the screen going dark, like a curtain dropping on a finished act. My phone vibrated seconds later. Not from Dad. Aunt Diane. Her message was brief. Are you okay? Your father's panicking. Says you're sabotaging him. I let the phone rest face down on the table next to the stack of new deeds and contracts bearing one name only. Mine. I didn't raise my voice. I raised a word. And that was enough. The gala shimmered under chandeliers heavy with crystal and old Boston wealth. Women floated in gowns like liquid silk. Men in tailored suits moved in tight knots of legacy and leverage. I stepped out of the car with Jenna at my side, both of us in black. Sleek, elegant, nothing overstated. The doorman greeted me by name. "Ms. Blake," he said, eyes flicking down the guest list. "Welcome. Your table is with the governor's group." I hadn't planned to attend. My donation, made under a shell name 5 years ago, was never meant to be traced back. But Diane had mentioned the gala in her message about Dad's panic. And if fate was offering a spotlight, I wouldn't waste it. Inside, Jenna led the way with quiet assurance. She held herself like a diplomat, every movement deliberate. We weaved through clusters of officials and donors until the MC's voice filled the space. And now, a special welcome to one of tonight's most distinguished contributors, Ms. Lauren Blake, biotech visionary and CEO of Blake Biogen. I felt the pause ripple like a dropped glass. Across the ballroom, my father's expression collapsed. He hadn't seen me yet. Natalie froze mid-conversation, mouth slightly open. Mom looked pale. Ben shifted awkwardly near the wine station. Only Diane seemed unsurprised. Jenna leaned in, whispering to a nearby aide. She prefers her title, CEO. The mayor's assistant nodded and corrected himself to the person next to him. I moved to my table as murmurs began. People making connections. A man approached me with outstretched hand. "Charles Monroe," he said, nodding toward Dad, who now stood stone still. "Your father and I have been speaking about a joint venture. I had no idea you were the same Blake. Your work is extraordinary." I smiled. "Thank you. It's been a long road." Natalie had made her way closer now, clinging to her flute of champagne like it could protect her. "Lauren," she said, trying for casual, "I didn't realize you'd be here." A woman nearby overheard and asked, "You two are sisters?" Natalie faltered. Yes, sort of. Half." I didn't correct her. I just turned to the woman and said, "We haven't spoken in a while." The pianist shifted to a minor key, the room tightening as anticipation built for the next speech. My name appeared again on the scrolling screen above the stage. Jenna stepped back just slightly, watchful, ready. The MC returned to the mic. "And now to thank tonight's most impactful donor, who helped us expand genomic therapy trials across 4 hospitals. Please welcome CEO Lauren Blake." I stood slowly. The room quieted. Not a cough, not a clink. My father's hand twitched by his side. I didn't look at him. On stage, the spotlight felt colder than it looked. I offered a modest thank you, a few words about collaboration and scientific hope. I didn't gloat. I didn't mention the Mitchells, but my silence was louder than applause. As I stepped down, a woman with a press badge approached, voice low. "Ms. Blake, do you mind a few questions about the Mitchell Foundation's recent tax misreport?" Buried under layers of tax jargon, I found it. The ledger that tied Dad's empire to my stolen college fund. The back room of Jenna's condo had once been a guest suite. Now it served as our war room. Curtains drawn, air heavy with blue light from twin monitors, and a whiteboard covered in Post-its, arrows, and timelines. Jenna sat hunched over her laptop, eyes scanning lines of code, while I sifted through a mountain of printed bank records. My fingers were ink-stained from highlighters and cross-referenced notes. "This cloud account, when did you last use it?" Jenna asked, her tone sharp but controlled. "Senior year," I replied, rubbing my temple. "I backed up my thesis data there. Forgot it even existed." Jenna clicked something and a folder popped open. Private Finance, LM. Inside were PDFs, Excel files, and hundreds of emails. We didn't speak for a full minute. Then Jenna murmured, "He didn't just take your money. He built a platform with it." I opened the first PDF, an early ledger entry from a decade ago. It showed an initial transfer from my scholarship award to an entity named Boston Equity One LLC. The corresponding note read, "For family asset acquisition." It had been siphoned 3 months before Dad helped me open my Roth IRA. Elena's on Zoom, Jenna said, swiveling the second monitor. The screen flickered, revealing Elena Gray's composed face. You were right to call me, Elena said after we shared our findings. These transactions are traceable. The shell company's registration links directly to Charles Mitchell through his business proxy, Martin S. Lowell. Martin was Natalie's father-in-law, I said slowly, piecing it together. Jenna pulled up another email. And here's something nastier. Look, it was a chain between Lowell and Dad, referencing a favor exchanged around the time of Natalie's divorce. A property deed had changed hands shortly after, under my name. I blinked, then leaned in. That's my signature. Elena leaned closer to the screen. Lauren, have you ever seen that mortgage document before? No. That document was used to secure a line of credit for the Mitchell family home. Jenna added, voice tight. I felt the breath leave my lungs. All those years I thought he'd paid the down payment himself. All those dinners where he boasted about buying debt-free. And now I saw it. My name, forged, tied to a house I was never welcome in. Jenna tapped quickly, converting the document to a secure file. We need a third opinion. A moment later, a message pinged into our private thread. Franklin is online. Franklin was our code name for a contact at the IRS, an insider, neutral, but not indifferent. He called in audio only. You've got substantial material, he said, voice clipped and efficient. Cross-state transfers, shell laundering, proxy fraud. But this one, he paused. The mortgage forgery? That's jail time. I said nothing. He continued. You're sitting on a volcano. If you go public with this, you're not just implicating Charles Mitchell. This could trigger federal audits, tax fraud cases, maybe even state-level campaign finance violations. That bribe trail you found? To cover Natalie's ex-husband's company. I added quietly. Exactly. That's a crime chain, Franklin said. So I'll ask you one question. The silence stretched. Are you prepared? He asked. For what happens if the whole thing burns down? You don't burn down a legacy in one night. You start with smoke they can't trace. The email to the Mitchell Foundation was crafted with surgical precision. Just one line. Effective immediately, the $500,000 pledge from Biotech Philanthropy LLC is withdrawn. No further disbursements should be expected. Jenna clicked send. Think they'll know it's you? She asked, not looking up. They'll suspect, but not confirm, I replied. That's the point. Outside her condo, Boston bristled with late autumn wind, leaves whipping along gutters like whispered warnings. Inside, our screens lit up with the first echoes. A junior account manager at the foundation replied to the email, frantic. Then a second message. Then silence. By mid-morning, the story was quietly spreading. A tweet from Forbes Financial posted, breaking, a biotech firm rescinds $500,000 in legacy donations to a major East Coast foundation. Ethics over nepotism? It tagged Blake Biotech. The comments blew up within minutes. No names mentioned. Yet. Just hints, speculation, and that soft, ominous buzz of public curiosity. Jenna glanced at me. Your dad's lawyer just called. Left a voicemail. Want to hear it? I nodded. She pressed play. The voice came out strained, too calm. Hi, Lauren. This is Richard Kessler. There's been confusion over a recent pledge reversal. If this was unintentional, we'd appreciate clarification. Charles is, well, he's a bit concerned. Let us know. I didn't respond. Instead, I put on my navy sheath dress and heels that sounded like authority across marble. We drove to the Seaport District where a roundtable interview for women in venture capital was underway. I wasn't on the schedule, but I had been invited. Jenna walked ahead, flashing her badge, and soon we were seated under lights, across from two founders and a senior editor from TechScope magazine. The moderator smiled. We're honored to be joined today by Lauren Blake, CEO of Blake Biogen. That name again. CEO. No one said it like a family member would, with skepticism or spite. Here, it carried gravity. I didn't say much. A few nods. A line or two about pipeline development. Jenna answered more than I did. The others, perhaps sensing something, filled the silences for me. That was the strategy. Presence without confession. Later that afternoon, my private line buzzed. Jenna raised an eyebrow as I read the ID. Office of Senator Devereaux. I picked up. "Ms. Blake?" said a woman's voice, clipped but polite. "I assist the senator with oversight on nonprofit compliance. There's an open review of the Mitchell Foundation's financial filings. We understand you may have insight." I kept my voice cool. I might. "Would you be willing to provide background in confidence?" "I'll consider it," I said. "Email me a formal request." She did. 3 minutes later. At sunset, I stood by the penthouse window, watching the lights of the city flicker like warning signals. Jenna brought tea, silent as always. I held the cup but didn't drink. My phone buzzed again. Natalie. Text only. All caps. "What are you doing? Dad is freaking out." They built a maze and laughed as I wandered. What they didn't know, I designed mazes for a living. The elevator ride to the 28th floor was silent except for the hum of tension between me and Jenna. She didn't speak. Didn't have to. We both knew this wasn't a confrontation. It was an execution. Elena Gray met us in the glass-walled lobby of Hensley and Pierce LLP, her navy pantsuit immaculate, her tablet already open. The trust advisor, Derek Fay, trailed behind her, visibly sweating beneath his tailored collar. His loyalty was split, his discomfort, entertaining. "This way," Elena said, her heels echoing sharply against the marble floor. The conference room looked like a war room dressed for a tech demo. Cold, white, sterile, with a long paneled table that reflected nothing but ice. Across it sat Mark Benton, counsel for the Mitchell family. He wore a smug half-smile and a tie too loud for someone facing litigation. We began with formalities. Jenna remained behind me, quiet but coiled. Elena led with precision. "Today, we file a formal motion to audit the Mitchell Family Trust under the Equitable Interest Clause of Massachusetts Trust Code Section 203. Benton chuckled. "Ms. Gray, you know as well as I do, this isn't a typical challenge. Your client walked away from the trust years ago." Elena didn't blink. "My client never waived her equity stake. The trust was seeded using proprietary royalties generated by her biotech licensing. We have payment trails. Would you like to see them?" Jenna handed over a folder. Inside, printouts traced the funds. Transfers from my royalty accounts in 2018 routed through Blake Biogen's licensing division directly into the Mitchell Trust to offset tax liabilities. All with my digital signature. Benton's eyes flicked over the documents, mouth tightening. "She signed," he muttered. "That implies consent." "Not when the documents were misrepresented and filed under the guise of routine tax management," Elena replied coolly. "This wasn't contribution. It was misappropriation." Derek Fay shifted in his seat, visibly shrinking. "Still," Benton tried again, "the court will question her motives. This looks personal, emotional." That was the moment. I leaned forward, voice low and even. "Mr. Benton, the only personal thing here is my name, on every wire transfer that propped up your client's lavish legacy. If that makes me emotional, so be it." Elena tapped her tablet. "We've submitted our audit request, with accompanying evidence and affidavits. As of this morning, the probate court has issued a temporary freeze on all disbursements from the Mitchell Trust, effective immediately." The words landed like a stone dropped in still water. Benton blinked. "You're freezing the entire fund?" "Yes," Elena said. "Pending forensic review. Assets, real property, outgoing support. All paused." A bead of sweat trickled down Derek's temple. I stood, gathering my coat. Let's see how they do without my money for 1 week. I knew he'd strike back. I just didn't expect him to use someone I once loved. The boardroom was too quiet. Not the respectful kind of silence, but the anticipatory kind. Like everyone already knew what was coming. Except me. Tyson Grant stood at the head of the table, fingers loosely interlaced, his mouth set in that familiar, performative calm. I used to admire that about him. Now it just looked like insulation. "I've made a decision," he said, eyes scanning the other board members but never landing on mine. "Effective end of quarter, I'll be stepping away from Blake Biotech. It's become clear that the company's internal culture isn't aligned with my values." A beat of silence. Then murmurs. Someone dropped a pen. "What culture are we talking about?" I asked, voice steady. "The one we built out of a dorm lab, or the one that brought in $80 million in private equity?" Tyson smiled, and I hated him for it. "I'm talking about toxicity, Lauren. The media circus. Your family drama is bleeding into our perception on the Hill. You know that." Jenna's fingers were already moving across her tablet behind me. The chair of the board, Mr. Lin, cleared his throat. "Let's stay professional." Professional. Tyson's resignation was timed too perfectly. Days after the trust freeze. Hours after the senator's aide called again. He wasn't jumping ship. He was sent. I left the boardroom before the press team could corner me. Jenna followed, silent until we were inside the elevator. "He's lying," she said. "I know." "No, I mean there's a trail." Back at the penthouse, Jenna pulled up financials she'd started combing weeks ago, on a hunch. Tyson's uncle, Arthur Grant, sat on the Mitchell Advisory Board. He'd been listed as a passive investor for years, but last month, a wire transfer had been issued from one of the Mitchell shell firms, a discreet $120,000, to a new entity called TG Strategy and Consulting, registered in Delaware. Tyson's name in the filings. I stared at the screen. He sold me out. Jenna didn't respond. She didn't need to. The next board vote was brutal. It wasn't just the proposal to expand our oncology research that was rejected. It was me. By a narrow margin, 4-3, the expansion deal I'd been developing for months was shelved. Temporarily, they said. But I could see it. Doubt was in the room now. Not about the science, but about me. I walked out without a word, ears ringing. By the time I reached the condo, Jenna was already there. Laptop open, a video paused on her screen. "You should see this," she said, her voice more steel than silk tonight. The footage was shaky, cell phone quality, clearly recorded at a bar. In it, Tyson leaned over a low table, laughing into his glass. The audio was grainy but clear enough. "Mitchell still control everything," he slurred. "Lauren just doesn't know it yet." I didn't blink, didn't breathe. Something inside me clicked, cold and final. Let them call me the disappointment. I built the foundation they're about to choke on. The room was colder than I expected, both in temperature and in tone. Steel shelves lined with legal binders and servers hummed faintly. The secure archive vault felt more like a bunker than a storage space, fitting for what I was about to unearth. The document Jenna named the map wasn't just a diagram. It was a declaration. Each line drawn in stark black ink, each arrow backed by timestamps, financial trails, and corporate filings that would make any prosecutor's heart race. At the center sat my name, Lauren Blake, anchoring the web like a nucleus. Not as a victim, as the origin. Franklin arrived first, his ID badge clipped tight to his blazer. No handshake, just a nod. "I've seen a lot of webs," he said, eyes sweeping the file. "But this is a guillotine." Elena arrived minutes later, crisp in her dark coat, carrying a slim briefcase. She didn't speak immediately, just reviewed the map with slow, deliberate glances. When she looked up, her expression was unreadable. "It's airtight," she said. "Every dollar accounted for. Every entity traceable. No room for plausible deniability." Franklin whistled low. "If this goes public, your father won't just face fines. We're talking fraud, money laundering, potentially perjury. And the foundation will fold within days. I finished for him. There was no satisfaction in my voice, just certainty. From there, things moved quickly. Elena prepared the exhibits for formal court submission, separated into 3 sealed packets marked A, B, and C. Jenna managed the digital contingencies, timing the media leak with clinical precision. The embargo was set to lift 6 hours after the court accepted our files. I made one stop on the way to the courthouse. The law firm that once handled all Mitchell estate matters sat on the edge of the financial district. Marble facade, brass fixtures like all the others. But it held history and irony. At the front desk, I handed the receptionist a plain cream-colored envelope. No logo, no message. Just a single printed label in bold font. Exhibit A, for immediate review. "Who is this for?" she asked. I smiled faintly. "They'll know." Outside, the wind had picked up, the kind that made skyscrapers hum and old leaves skitter across the sidewalk. Back at the condo, I stood in front of the floor-to-ceiling windows, watching the city prepare for nightfall. Behind me, Jenna's footsteps were soft but purposeful. She handed me my phone. A single message blinked on the screen. From her. "Press embargo ends in 6 hours. Are you ready to watch the house burn?" I didn't reply. Just stared out at the skyline and whispered, almost to myself, "They lit the match years ago. I'm just turning on the lights." The leak hit the news before they had time to breathe. Mitchells were trending, for all the wrong reasons. I woke to the buzz of my phone dancing across the nightstand like it had a pulse. Jenna didn't wait for permission to enter. She held out her tablet with a single headline stretched across the screen in bold, bleeding font. "Shell games and tax lies. The house that Mitchell's built is cracking." Underneath, side-by-side images. My father red-faced outside the courthouse, and me, an older, cropped photo from a biotech roundtable, calm, analytical, untouched. "They're calling it the most elegant takedown of the decade," Jenna said, eyes gleaming. "And no one even knows the half of it." By noon, every major outlet had a segment. CNN Bloomberg. Even daytime talk shows were dragging my family name through the mud with giddy commentary. Dad's offshore accounts, the shell companies wrapped in philanthropy, the paper trail of donor money redirected into real estate in Barbados. It was all laid out with terrifying clarity. And I said nothing. No interviews, no podium. Just one post on the Blake Biotech media page. "Truth doesn't need commentary." Lauren Blake. That post was shared 1.4 million times in under 2 hours. Meanwhile, the Mitchell household imploded in real time. A reporter caught footage of Dad emerging from the courthouse, lips pulled back in a snarl, flinging papers at his lawyer and shouting. The video froze mid-yell, looped and went viral with a caption, "When the trust fund fights back." Natalie didn't fare better. At a cancer research fundraiser, one she co-chaired, she took the mic trembling, tried to claim innocence, and ended up sobbing into the floral arrangement. A staffer let her off stage mid-sentence as flashes from camera phones turned the room into a strobe light of humiliation. And me? I sat in my glass-walled office, the blinds drawn halfway, sipping tea while Jenna took calls I didn't have to answer. The storm swirled around me, but I was the eye, unmoved. "Here," she said, handing over a manila envelope. "From Elena." Inside, a formal notice of court filing, the Mitchell Foundation's primary operating account. Frozen. Effective immediately. On the last page, a single line stood out. "All disbursements halted pending federal investigation into misappropriation of funds." I let the paper settle in my lap, breathing slow, deliberate. This wasn't vengeance. It was consequence. The intercom chimed once. "Elena on line 2, Jenna said. "She says you'll want to hear this." I took the call, pressing the receiver to my ear. Her voice came through, calm and sharp as ever. "They just subpoenaed the entire board," she said. "Lauren, this is going to trial. Pain was my inheritance. Now it's their legacy. The courtroom buzzed with quiet anticipation. Reporters filled the back rows, their pens hovering, eyes sharp. I walked in with Jenna 2 steps behind, Elena at my left. I wore no designer brand, no showy jewelry, just a navy suit and a silver pin that once belonged to my grandmother. A silent nod to the only Mitchell who ever looked at me like I mattered. My father sat across the aisle, rigid, jaw clenched. Natalie wouldn't meet my gaze. She stared at her nails, filed to perfection, trembling slightly. There was no warmth in the room, just marble floors, cool wood, and the scent of courtroom formality. The judge called my name. I stepped up. The mic was angled too low. I didn't adjust it. Let them lean in. "I am Lauren Blake," I said, voice steady. "And I am here to speak the truth." I didn't rush. I let every syllable land like a gavel. I told them about the college fund that vanished while Dad bought Natalie a vacation home. About the medical bills I paid for him with no thank you, only silence. About my trust fund, quietly drained under the excuse of family needs. I showed spreadsheets, emails, even receipts for flights I never took that were billed in my name. They listened. I saw one juror tilt her head slightly. A friend of the family, Mrs. Kramer, long retired, covered her mouth when the projector clicked to the copy of a forged signature. Mine, on a mortgage deed I had never seen. Then I spoke about the invisible wounds. Their cruelty was never loud, I said. It was absence, being left out of family photos, being mocked behind closed doors. The way my father told others I was just hormonal when I started a company they didn't understand. I paused. "They didn't cut me off," I said finally. I walked out, because I knew I would rather be alone than owned. The room didn't breathe for a second. Then came the defense. Dad tried to stand. Elena warned me he might. He blamed age, claimed confusion, dementia. But Jenna had cued the evidence. A video, 2 months old. My father's voice, clear and calculating as he coached Natalie on how to handle me. The courtroom went still. The judge leaned forward. "I see no signs of confusion in that recording," she said. Dad sat down. He looked smaller than I remembered. As I stepped off the stand, I passed the jury box. One woman, a nurse, I think, dabbed her eyes with the tissue. Another juror nodded slightly, just once. The judge glanced at the papers in front of her, then looked up. "I see no reason to delay the trial," she said. And with that, the Mitchells realized this wasn't just a hearing. It was a reckoning. They stopped calling. Not out of shame, but because they knew it was over. The office windows glowed with the soft amber of late afternoon. Below us, Boston moved on as if nothing had happened. Cabs honking, boats drifting across the harbor. But within this glass tower, the temperature was different. Calmer. Unshaken. I sat at the head of the table, skimming a report. Jenna stood at the far end, organizing folders for next week's biotech summit. She didn't need to speak. She could sense my silence meant peace today, not tension. Across the room, my phone buzzed once, then again. I glanced without reaching. Voicemail. Natalie. Jenna tilted her head but said nothing. I tapped delete without listening. It had been like this for days. No dramatic confrontations. No long-winded apologies, just silence. Their absence had more weight than any scream. No one came to the office. No lawyer threatened to cease and desist. No relative sent a weak, "we didn't know" email. Because they did know. They always had. The Mitchell Foundation's homepage was offline now. Under review. It read, their Twitter account hadn't posted in 4 days, which by today's PR standards meant they were hemorrhaging. A headline floated across one of the muted screens on the wall. Mitchell legacy crumbles amid IRS charges and board defections. I leaned back. Update from Franklin, Jenna said quietly, sliding a file toward me. I opened it. One clean page. United States v. Charles Mitchell et al. Formal charges filed. Tax fraud. Asset misrepresentation. Illegal use of nonprofit funds. Elena had been right. Every breadcrumb we followed had led to this. And now, their empire was held together with duct tape and delusion. Country club? I asked, almost idly. Membership revoked as of this morning. He tried to argue until someone reminded him of the donation discrepancies. I allowed myself a small smile. Not of joy, but of release. This wasn't revenge anymore. It was gravity. I had simply let the truth fall where it belonged. Jenna's phone pinged. She read the message, nodded slightly, then turned to me. "Dad's old ally, George Tillman?" she said. "He's agreed to testify. Franklin just confirmed." I closed my eyes for a second. Tillman had been the last loyal soldier, the man who used to smile at me like I was invisible. His defection meant one thing. There was no fortress left for them to hide in. Jenna hesitated. Natalie called again. I raised an eyebrow. "She left a voicemail," she continued. "Said she was sorry. Said she didn't know everything." I waited. Said, "Please, just make it stop." My hand stayed still. Not clenched, not shaking, just still. "I deleted it," Jenna added. "I figured you wouldn't want to hear it." I nodded once. That was the right call. Silence can be the loudest form of guilt. And now, with every message they didn't send, every invitation I wasn't copied on, they were confirming what I already knew. It wasn't that they didn't care. It was that they knew I no longer did. The door clicked open. Elena stepped in, crisp in navy with a small file in her hand. "They'll try to settle," she said without preamble. "But they don't have leverage. We do." I took the file, read quickly, signed once. When she left, the room was still again. Jenna tapped the table, drawing my attention. "There's one thing left you haven't done," she said softly. "You ready?" I never needed their approval. I only needed the silence that came after justice. The lights above the ballroom shimmered like stars made of polished glass. Everything glowed. Tablecloths of ivory satin, flutes of champagne bubbling in quiet elegance, guests in evening gowns and tailored suits murmuring softly beneath a string quartet's warm hum. But nothing glowed brighter than the woman standing center stage, her voice steady, her silhouette poised. Me, Lauren Blake. The black sheep, once mocked in whispers, now the host of a gala held in the name of progress. Behind me, the banner stretched tall across the grand hall. Blake Foundation, funding the future of female founders. The applause quieted as I spoke. "There's a saying," I began, "that legacy is what you leave behind. But to me, legacy isn't about what people say after you're gone. It's about what they never said when you were trying to survive." A pause. No one moved. "I didn't come from a family that believed in me," I continued. "But I did come from a fire that forged something stronger, something that no amount of silence or shame could dim." I looked toward the front row. Jenna gave the smallest nod. Elena beside her, lips curved in the subtlest smile. Across the room, I spotted the mayor, 2 senators, and a dozen young women holding notepads, eyes wide and shining. In this room tonight are people who showed up, who took a chance on someone without a famous last name or a ready-made trust fund. I built something because someone believed I could. And now, I want to pass that forward. I stepped aside. The screen lit up behind me, flicking through a reel. Lab footage from my early university days, news clippings from the IPO, the court headlines, the quiet photo of me holding the file marked Exhibit A. Then it shifted to smiling faces. First grant recipients of the Blake Foundation. Women with fire in their eyes. As the video faded, a familiar voice broke the silence. "Lauren Blake, may I join you on stage?" I turned, surprised. It was Professor Heller, my first research advisor. The man who stayed late in the lab with me, who once slipped me a textbook and said, "You don't need their money, just give me data that sings." He stepped up holding a small velvet box. "This is from the Council for Tech Advancement," he said. "For resilience, for reinvention, for rewriting the damn rules. He opened it. Inside, a silver medallion gleamed under the spotlights. For a moment, I couldn't breathe. The applause came like a wave. Slow, swelling, then thunderous. I felt my throat tighten, but not from grief. From release. The kind that cracks you open so something brighter can live inside. Jenna rushed up after the stage cleared, cheeks flushed from pride and motion. She held out a glass of champagne. "You okay?" she whispered. I nodded, swallowed, laughed. Just once. "I've made peace," I said, voice soft. "But I haven't forgotten." They thought exile was punishment. It turned out to be freedom. The Mitchell house looked smaller now. Its windows, once glowing with curated warmth, stared blankly into the early evening haze. The manicured lawn had begun to brown along the edges, weeds creeping into corners where perfection used to reign. A new sign had been hammered into the front garden. Auction. All offers considered. I stood at the edge of the sidewalk, coat pulled tight around me as a breeze slipped through the sycamores. The same trees I'd climbed as a child. The ones they once told me were too tall for girls. The gate creaked when I pushed it open. Inside, the house echoed with hollowness. The furniture was gone. Only plastic mats remained where rugs used to sit. Walls were bare, the space holding the ghost of laughter and cruelty alike. I moved slowly down the hallway, past the kitchen island where Natalie once knocked over a glass of milk and blamed me. Past the dining room where Dad once praised Ben for a C+ while ignoring my straight A's. Every corner still whispered, but the voices had lost their sting. Upstairs, the door to my old bedroom hung open. The walls were freshly painted. Beige, lifeless. In the back of the closet, tucked behind a broken vent cover, I found it. A scrap of paper, aged and wrinkled. A stick figure drawing of our family. Me, off to the side, smaller than the rest. The corner had been torn years ago, a jagged rip through my cartoon smile. But I'd signed it. Lauren, age 6. I held it for a long moment. Then I folded it and slid it back into the vent. Downstairs, I walked to the mantel. Set a framed photo there. Me, Jenna, Elena, the entire biotech team standing under the banner of our IPO day. Everyone laughing, real and free. I leaned a note against it, scrawled in black ink. "We built what you never believed in." As I stepped outside, the sky shifted to indigo, the kind of blue that pressed gently on your shoulders. A man with a clipboard passed me on the walkway. Real estate agent, likely. He didn't recognize me. Didn't even look twice. That was fine. I turned once, not to glance at the house, but to hear what no longer lived in it. The weight. The expectation. The ache. My phone buzzed. A voicemail from an unknown number. I tapped play. "Lauren?" Dad's voice began. Rough, hesitant. "I don't expect you to answer. Just wanted to say..." Silence. Then the message ended. Unfinished. Unsent. I deleted it and walked away without turning back. They cut me off that night, but I became unreachable long before. In the end, the silence of the Mitchells spoke louder than any apology. They knew they had lost, not just money, but the one person they couldn't control. Lauren didn't need revenge in the form of rage. Her justice came quietly, delivered through truth, strategy, and the undeniable weight of her success. Like a tide breaking against a rotting wall, the truth didn't need to shout. It simply didn't stop. When injustice is met with unwavering courage, the final verdict can echo through a lifetime. Like, share, and comment your thoughts below. Type 1 if you felt her pain and triumph, or 2 if you think justice still has more to say.